Welcome back to the Capes and Tights podcast right here on capesandtights.com. I'm your host, Justin Soderberg. This episode is once again brought to you by our friends over at Galactic Comics and Collectibles at galacticcomicsandcollectibles.com. This episode is Chris Condon, comic book writer of books such as That Texas Blood, The Enfield Gang Massacre, Ultimate Wolverine, Green Arrow, the upcoming Far Down Below at Mad Cave Studios, which is coming March 26th to a local comic book shop near you, as well as the May release of a book called The Goddamn Tragedy over at Oni Press. But this episode, we talked mostly about Far Down Below, which is coming March 26th, like I said, to your local comic book shop. But before you listen, check us out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Blue Sky, Threads, all that stuff. You can rate, review, subscribe over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find your podcasts. You can also find us on YouTube, as well as reviews, opinions, countdowns, all that stuff over at capesandtights.com. But this is comic book writer Chris Condon talking Far Down Below from Mad Cave Studios. Enjoy, everyone. Welcome to the podcast, Chris. How are you today?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing well. Doing well. It's starting to. I live in Maine. It's starting to warm up a little bit. The last couple of weeks have been snowy and cold. So it's warming up today. That's a good thing.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm in New Jersey and it's like kind of warming up a little bit, but I don't trust it.
Well, it's
Not
funny
on,
because
not on,
I feel
not
like
until we're in
since I've
May.
been like a young kid, I lived in New England my entire life, and I just feel like it's always been like snow and then slightly warmer. You know, like you're shoveling snow the next day, you feel like almost you don't need to wear a winter hat or something like that. It just like warms up a bit. The past few snowstorms here in Maine, it's been like snow and then frigid temperatures,
Yeah.
which means like all that snow and slush that like catches in your wheel well just freezes and doesn't melt. And so
Oh,
like I've like had like you turn my wheel in my car and I just like you hear or like just scraping. It's been weird, and so it's warming up a little bit now, and finally the snow is melting off my car, which is a good thing. But you know what? I'm a Mainer. We complain about the weather. It's what we do, and so it's gonna be too warm here in a second. So it's how we live our lives. It's too hot or too cold. But yeah. Well, welcome to the podcast. I really appreciate you taking the time out to chat comics with us, Chris, here on the podcast. But let's dive a little bit into I mean, how'd you get into writing comics in the first place? Let's just touch on that a little bit before we get too far into Far Down
uh,
Below.
how did I get into it? I got into it by accident, kind of. I mean, I was trying to do a film, and Jacob Phillips did some concept art for me, and then I got frustrated with trying to get funding together to make a film. And I'd always loved comics and was like, "Hey, Jake, you don't have a comic and I don't have a comic. Do you want to make a comic instead?" And he was like, "Yeah, let's do it." And then we came up with That Texas Blood, which was originally going to be a film. And so that sort of blossomed and became its own thing. And then we just kept doing our own thing. And then, editors would reach out. And then, little by little, built up a little bit of uh, fan base and a little bit of cred, and next thing I know, I'm writing Ultimate Wolverine, and that's how it happened.
Yeah, that's to say, next thing you know, you're tackling new Wolverine stories for Marvel. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
It is. It's funny how some people are like they grind for years and years and years and years, and they do like a one-off, like one shot for Marvel, and then there's other people who grind. You're still grinding, doing this and getting their work out there, but all of a sudden I know where you're tackling the new Ultimate Wolverine stories at Marvel, not too far into starting to write comics. It's pretty much must feel pretty crazy.
Yeah, no, it's pretty wild. I mean, and something like what we're going to be talking about today, Far Down Below, this is an idea that I've had since high school, so it's kind
Okay.
of just been like full circle in a lot of ways. Even writing Ultimate Wolverine and Green Arrow, I mean, that's like, I never got into comics to write superhero books. I kind of just it was an avenue to tell my stories, and I was really fortunate that it took off in the way that it took off, and I was just kind of happy to be doing that. And I love comics, so it was like a no-brainer for me to just like continue doing it in the way that it was working, just doing stuff.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, and then you get offers to do this stuff, and you start thinking to yourself, oh, well, do I have a Green Arrow story to tell? Do I have an Ultimate Wolverine story? Like, how does that, and then you start thinking about it, and it's like, all of a sudden you click back into what it was like to be a kid and like playing with toys and all that kind of stuff, and it's pretty fun. But yeah, it all just kind of happened by accident. It's
Well, and that's awesome. I love that. That's a fun thing. It also proves to people like anybody really can do this if you put your like mind and heart into it. Really, like it's not
yeah,
as simple as just being able to like just being able to like, oh, I want to apply for a job. I want to apply for a job at Best Buy. I mean, it's a pretty good chance you're going to get a job at Best Buy if you have a good background
yeah,
and so on and so forth. You can't just do that. You can't just be like, hey, Marvel, I want to work with you. Cool. When can you come in for an interview? It's a little bit more how who you know or who sees you. But yeah, anybody really can do this if you put your mind
yeah.
to it and you're pretty good at it. I mean, do you find yourself now that you've worked on Green Arrow, you've worked on Ultimate Wolverine, these things that your mind is like just in case I ever get called to do a Magneto story, I'll have a Magneto story in the hover, or is it just one of those things that when it comes up, you'll start thinking about it?
Yeah, when it comes up, I'll be like, let me do some research, and then I'll sit down and like be tinkering with something. But yeah, I mean, it's like I never thought to myself I'd get to do Wolverine, so I didn't really have any plan of what I would do. And then for that one, it was like, well, I one of my all-time favorite stories is Weapon X, so I was like, let
Mhm,
me try to do a spin on Weapon X, but in this other universe. And the idea of doing it as Winter Soldier came from doing that and then so it was just sort of like no-brainer kind of things, and just like going back and rereading a lot of like the Claremont
mhm,
stuff and rereading Astonishing X-Men and like all this stuff, just sort of gathering all this information and pulling whatever I want from it. Um, but yeah, it's funny, getting that stuff. But I don't plan, like I'm not sitting
yeah,
there with a story in my back pocket. I mean, there's some characters that I do
yeah,
want to write.
yeah.
Like I have a Scarecrow idea I really want to do. Everybody laughs, but I have a wannabes thing I really want to do. So it's like there's stuff I want to do that I haven't quite done yet. But yeah, do I have ideas that are just like, do I have like Magneto stories and all that? No, no. But I mean, it'd be fun, you know.
Yeah, I mean it's true. I mean, I'm sure most people who write, Marvel, DC comics don't have stories for every character, but yeah, they have their favorite, like you just mentioned, or stories that you really want to tell. But I mean, do you find yourself that it was more difficult or more of a, trying to wrap your brain around doing something like Ultimate Wolverine versus Green Arrow? Has Ultimate Wolverine's like a kind of a fresh start on something, so you have to like, have a little bit of more playground to play with.
I mean. Yeah, and no, I mean it wasn't, I wouldn't say difficult so much. I mean, for Green Arrow, we also kind of had a blank
Yeah,
slate in a
yeah,
way because of where Williamson ended his run, which was that there was basically, I mean, I guess I can probably say spoilers since the event ended a while ago, but like, Ollie turned on everybody
hmm
and then turned on everybody again by being like, oops, gotcha. And it was like, kind of in that, with that frame, and then coming at it with this idea that editorial had, which is
yeah,
that they wanted to go more street level. I just sort of took that as like a chance to make a clean break and, do something else for a second, and then, slowly start trickling in, more family stuff and
hmm
all that. But for me, like personally, like Green Arrow has always been like, Denny O'Neil and Mike Grell, sort of like this abrasive, kind of liberal asshole,
yeah,
and so that was fun to get to do a full arc in which we kind of dove into that. And then with Wolverine, like you said, I mean, it is a blank slate.
yeah,
You're basically given like, carte blanche. You can do whatever you want. But there, at the end of the day, like it's Wolverine, so everybody knows Wolverine. And it's like, you could do something completely off the wall and like go bonkers with it. But my approach to it and like my feeling on it as a fan, because I read books. Like I
yeah.
literally like I have a stack of, I mean, I don't, I have a stack of like X-Men books here that I've just been reading through. But like as a fan, I'm like, that might be fun for, you know, an issue or two, but
Yeah,
I think at the end of the day, like we all know what Wolverine is.
yeah,
So it's like, the novelty of the thing would wear off, and it's like, well, is anybody going to care about this 10 years from now?
exactly.
So
Well,
it'd be
yeah,
So my approach was really just kind of taking it and being like, what is the most like like the actual like when you talk about like, oh, this is the ultimate story of this
Mhm.
character. I was like, let me approach it that way and just try to tell a unique, good Wolverine story. And so that was the idea.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would imagine it's yeah, you mentioned a little bit there that like doing a one shot, for an example, like a what if Wolverine did this is a lot more of a go off the wall, do whatever you want because it's literally just a alternate story of something for fun. Whereas hopefully this ultimate universe lasts a while, and so you do have to set some sort of a foundation for Wolverine moving forward. You can't just be like, oh, I'm gonna go
Yeah.
batshit crazy, and then be like, okay, hopefully this lasts 10 years, hopefully it lasts 5 years, whatever it may
Yeah.
be. Someone else is eventually is going to write this story, write this character, and you want to be able to put the foundation together for them, not to be like, oh, by the way, yeah, I was really, 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 really out of my mind that time I wrote that comic. So good luck. See you later.
I mean, that may be the case. I might be out of my mind. But no, I mean it's for me it's like I have 12 issues that I'm
Mm,
doing, and so I have an end in mind, and I like that. I like that I have an end in mind. Um, that everybody always wants you to do more,
mm.
and like, are they going to extend it? Are they going to extend? And I'm like, I don't. I hope they don't. Because I don't want to. I like my story. I think it
Yes.
works as as like a as a single story. And I know that some people don't necessarily like that. Um, they want to continue reading it, but I think that sometimes things should end.
Mm,
I always love like a mini, there's like finite stories that you end up really loving, like Bad Bang Year One or Weapon X.
yeah.
You have like these, serialized stories that do have an ending. And I think that's great, and I don't really have any like desire to be, writing for Marvel or DC like indefinitely. Like I
Mm,
love those companies and like what they do and what they represent, and I'm really fortunate to be doing it, but I also don't want to be like that guy
yeah.
who's like doing only Marvel and like he's like excels at like sort of like Donny Cates with like Venom or
Yeah.
whatever. Like I don't want to be that guy. So I just kind of I would like to, if possible, I don't know if it's possible in a career. I'm just starting out doing
Yeah.
it, but like I would like to be able to just like drop in, tell a
Right.
story, and then leave. And a little. I mean, we got extended for Green Arrow, so I'm doing another arc on
Yeah.
Green Arrow, but um, I don't really plan on staying on that forever. So.
You don't want to do like 60, 70 issues of Green Arrow. I thought you
No.
mentioned about like coming up with a story. If I do, I have a story for it. Like I feel like that would also be difficult after a while, being like, I got to continue writing these stories
Yeah,
and
well, I
trying to figure
mean,
out new stories for Green
that
Arrow.
was even the thing with this next arc. I mean, the first arc, I had the story. I was like, oh, this is pretty good. And then, like, what am I going to do for the next one? And it's like, what characters do you bring in? What characters, like, how do you do it? And, I was like, well, people like these characters, but these characters always show up. So I like went back into like the adventure comic stuff from like the
Yeah.
50s and found a villain who showed up once and then just disappeared. And I was like, I'm going to bring him back. So that's what we're doing. But it's like, it's always funny to be like, what do people want to see? Which I think you do have to think about, but at the end of the day, you just kind of have to like tell whatever story you think is the best
Mhm.
story. And like the story that we're doing in Green Arrow, I think is a nice continuation of what we had in the first arc, in terms of being grounded, um, and dark and gritty and all that, all the
Mhm.
BS terms. Um, but at the end of the day, I wanted to push things a little bit further. So we're bringing Roy
Yeah.
in, and so we're doing a little bit more. Yeah, we're bringing a little bit more of the family into it, which is fun. I get to explore a little bit of that, and there's some stuff that I want to do that I love to do in comics, which I don't really know if anybody else cares, but I like doing it, which is I like to actually like be, in conversation with books that came out in the
Yeah.
past. Like I did it in my Daredevil one shot that I did. I do it in did it in Harley Quinn, the short story Jacob Phillips and I did. Um, and that's the thing that I like to do because I think that there's literally like 70 years of history sometimes
Mhm.
with characters, so why not, play around with it? Um, and, I mean, we do a certain amount of that in Wolverine as
Yeah.
well, but it's obviously different because you're putting your spin on things.
Yes,
Um,
because yeah, the ultimate stuff of it. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I read all the the previous issues on
Mhm.
like certain characters, and I try to pull as much from that as I can. But then I feel like that's important to like get you like understand the character, and then you can twist it, and you can
Yes.
change and do whatever you want with it.
You obviously you're busy now with doing Ultimate Wolverine. You've got you Green Arrow going on. You got some one shots things here. You did some stories in Cruel Kingdom and in those EC stuff
Yeah.
for Oni Press there, which is awesome. Those things are phenomenal. All of them. I like it. Like any of those anthologies. I just haven't got one that has come out from the EC currently that I'm like, this sucks. They're all really awesome. Like this is really cool, and I love seeing the
Yeah, they're
different
great.
creators. It's like different creators getting to play with each other too, which is really cool and all that sense too. But like, so that Texas Blood is what a lot of people know you for. Who, if they know your name, they know that
Yeah.
that series. I mean, we went 20 issues. Was that planned for 20 issues? I mean, did you have that story the whole thing, or was it like a 5 issue miniseries that you continued on? Or I mean, we'll get into far down below, but we just wanted to touch like it was a fun run, so I just didn't know if you had planned
Well,
that
it's
all
not
from the
over.
beginning. Okay.
We're
Oh,
gonna
okay.
do
So there you
more,
go. Yeah.
but yeah, I mean the goal is we want to do 50.
Okay.
And then we would end, and then we could even go further from there, but like the Joe Bob of it all
Mhm.
would end at 50.
Okay.
Like that would be like where we want to go with it. Um, but yeah, I mean the idea, so when we pitched it to Image, we pitched it with like the idea of it being a series, like, and that was an interesting thing too, was breaking down like what would a series look like,
Mhm.
if we were going to do a series. And like I for some reason, I don't know why, but I had like a million stories and I wanted to tell that took place in Texas already. And so I was like, ooh, this is like a good, what if I just like have them all set in one county and then just have these characters like come, and then so that was like really where it kind of came from, the idea of doing the series. But I just kind of like roughly pitched what we wanted to do. I mentioned Eversol, which was in the second arc, in the pitch, and then kind of I had an idea for what I wanted to do with each arc. So I know where like things are gonna go um for the next three or
Mhm.
four arcs. But yeah, it was just like it we sort of had like a soft idea of what we wanted to do. And then once we actually did the first arc and it sold well enough, and then like we had an audience that wanted more from us, then I kind of like really sat down and was like, okay, well, where are we gonna go from here? And
Mhm.
like, does it work? How does it work? All that. And then, we did the Enfield spinoff too. So, and that kind of opened up that gate for us that
Mhm.
if we want to do spinoffs, we can, which is fun. So I mean, we have 20 issues of like the main title, that
Yeah.
Texas, but we technically have like 26 issues, which is really fun to be able to play with and expand the world that way, and where you're not just, beholden to whatever characters were in that specific thing.
That's awesome, and it's awesome to hear that there's more to that world that you can build off of. But like you it's great where it is too. So if there ever was a point where it was like, yeah, we can't do any more with this thing, I think that's it's also great where it is, which is really kind of a good thing to have. You didn't like just it's not like this massive thing where like people are like, oh, we need more of this right now, or we're gonna be really
Yeah.
upset. Like this is it's really cool how it's sitting where it's sitting now. But like, yeah, more would be fun. I'm looking forward to that for sure. But so you and Jacob did that, and you did the Enfield Gang Massacre together.
Yeah.
Is there so far down below coming here from Mad Cave Studios? It's you and is it Gege Gigi Shaw
GG. Yeah.
Gigi
GG.
Shaw? You and Gigi doing this book together. The one of the things I will say right now is the book is well written. I loved it. It's a phenomenal book. It is beautiful. Like I will tell
Yeah.
you right now. So this
GG
is
did an
nothing
amazing
against
job.
Gigi of it all, but is there a real reason why it's not with Jacob? Or I know Jacob did a
Uh,
cover, but
no, I mean, so Jake and I are doing a book right now.
okay,
The hasn't been announced yet. I think it's going to
okay,
be announced at San Diego. And it's not that Texas Blood related. So he's
okay,
just busy, and he's doing
okay.
another book with Tate Brownell as well. So it's like he's just busy doing stuff, and then coloring his dad's stuff. I'd love to have him on every book. But there's also, one of the fun things about doing comics is that you get to work with people
Yeah.
that you love their work. And Gigi was somebody who I loved their work on Made in Korea
Mm.
with Jeremy Holt.
Yeah.
So I was a big fan of their work already. So I was like, oh well, I
Yeah.
pitched a couple names to Mad Cave, who I'd like as an artist on it, and Gigi was one of the first names that I mentioned. And I was really fortunate that Gigi said yeah. Um, but yeah, I mean, we do have Jake on the covers, so
Yes.
we're remaining in family that way. We're just I like to
And so
keep it
there's
in the
nothing.
family.
I hate to say it because it almost sounds like I'm putting Gigi's work down, but like it's just one of those things you see the success of the team that you have,
Yeah,
and what people are used to seeing, and seeing your name with someone else on an independent comic like this is just different. But I love it too, is that's a big thing you mentioned, to be able to work with new people.
yeah,
And to me, I. Like I said, I fell in love. I opened it. I was amazed. I don't know what it was. There's some of these comics out there that just like look good and feel good and all. There was something that just like I felt amazing reading this book. Like I actually had this weird
yeah,
like euphoric feeling of like, oh, this is really good, cool story, but also like it's just beautiful. The colors are amazing, the design's amazing.
yeah.
Everything about the book is just stunningly attractive. And I think that was like one of those things where I'm like, screw Jacob Phillips then. No, just kidding.
I'll tell
You
them
need to
that.
work with Gigi all the time. Yeah, no, no. But
No. I
it's
mean,
just phenomenally
I'm
looking.
glad you think that because I mean, I felt that way. I think that Gigi did a phenomenal job. I mean, so this is like full disclosure. I mean, this
Yeah.
is an idea that I had in 2008, 2009 before I graduated from high
Mhm.
school. So I mean, this was an idea that I had that I wrote originally, and it was very small compared to what it became.
Okay.
And just over the years, I just like tinkered with it, and I sent it out to like screenplay competitions and stuff like that. And like, it got a little bit of heat here and there, but nothing ever happened with it. But it was this idea that I just always loved. I always loved this idea of like paying homage to, 80s Stephen King and like
Mm.
80s like Joe Dante and Spielberg but also, paying homage to Jules Verne, which was really
Mhm.
important to me in my childhood. And so, yeah, so handing it off to an artist, you kind of have to take a certain amount of it on faith and just be like, I hope you don't screw this up because it's like I have an idea in my mind. And
Yeah.
then I've been really fortunate that I don't think I've ever had a bad experience with an artist where
Mhm.
they've turned something in and I've not liked it. And in the case of Gigi, Gigi just like blew it out of the water. Like
Yeah.
she just did this amazing job. Just designing the monolith and
Mhm.
then the house and just like gets the vibe of it all. That sort of that 80s vibe of it. And like obviously like worried that people would be like, oh, this is just like a Stranger's Thing ripoff, but like
Yeah.
I I've been like to this ideas in the back of my mind since like high school, so I'm like, who cares?
You're like that.
And just,
Yeah. The Stranger Things is a ripoff of Far Down Below. I don't know what you're talking about.
yeah, well, there you go. But yeah, it's just like it's so cool to actually see it come to life
Mhm.
and come to life in such a vibrant way. And like you said, the colors are like phenomenal. The drawing is phenomenal.
Yeah.
And it's just yeah, the colors especially, they're just like they have this like great nostalgic feel to them.
Mhm.
I'm really
And
glad that
they're
you highlighted that.
and they're different in that sense that like dark rooms feel dark, underground feels like underground, like there's vibrancy to some of the colors. There's just different shades. Like it's just like every page looked perfect in a sense. I also feel like there's some people who tend to randomly just like, okay, cool, this is the background. They'll do a couple little sketches here and there of like what's in the background, but it feels like Gigi like actually like paid a lot of attention to what's going on in the background too. Like almost to
Yeah.
the point where it's almost too much in a sense that like you don't need to do that. But I like that attention to detail too. Where like
Yeah.
in the basement, like they're in the basement at one point in their in this house, they're one of the main characters' house, and they're looking through things. Like you could have just put like a black shelf with like blur on it basically, and like it would have been like, okay, cool, we're in a basement, but there's actually like stuff on the shelves and things like that, which I appreciated because it gave me something to look at. It makes me, there's certain comics where I like to read and I go read it and I go, cool, I read it. One of these days maybe again I'll read it again, I don't know, we'll see. But like when issue 2 comes out, I find myself probably wanting to pick this issue back up and read it again to prepare myself for the next issue, but also to look at things in the background and look at the nuances that were put into it, to the effort into this comic. And
Yeah.
I think that this one stood out in that sense. It's like it's so funny because a lot of times I read a comic book like that, and I'm like, oh, I should get this person on the podcast sometime. This is great. This is a great, this is an amazing thing. And then I read this one, I'm like, awesome, Chris is coming on the podcast. So I can actually talk to the creative team. This is amazing. And it was kind of funny because I just got it on Friday, which
Yeah.
Mad Cave sometimes it's so far in advance. Like it's insane sometimes where I'm like, dude, this comic book doesn't even FOC for like 2 months, and I've already seen this comic. But yeah, so it was just amazing. So I thought the experience of reading it was just so phenomenal, and the story. And I love how the fact that you created this story so many years ago and tinkered with it along the way. That maybe that's one of the reasons why I liked it so much, because you kind of like fine tuned it over the years. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean it's been really fun to just kind of sit with it and see it evolve and going back and I'll look sometimes at the stuff that I wrote back in the day and be like, wow, it's crazy to me that it came from that to this
Mhm,
and just kind of and it like fully it's fully formed now. It's got a voice, it's got its own it's got its own set of characters and its own set of rules and it's just
mhm.
it's really fun to see that come to fruition. I mean, that's one of those wonderful things about just like sticking with things,
Yeah,
you just if you just stick with it. I mean, that's the I mean, I'm really fortunate a lot of the ideas that I've had for years and years and years are finally coming to fruition. The thing I'm doing with Jake is another idea
yeah.
that's been kicking around
Okay.
for a long time. But yeah, I mean, it's really cool. I mean, I don't without because it's like I don't want to get into like spoiler territory,
Yeah.
but it's like I'm really excited for people to read it because it's a 6 issue mini or a 5 issue mini, and it's like there could be more if we wanted to
Mhm,
do more. I really hope people pick it up, because I do think that there would be a fun way to continue doing this story.
mhm,
But like it just goes to wild places that I don't think people are necessarily expecting. I mean, in a way you might expect because, there's precedent with, it's a version of Journey to the Center of the Earth.
yeah.
But, I don't think that people are necessarily expecting the twists and turns and where things go with personalities in terms of the characters and all that. Um, and it's fun for me also to stretch my legs a little bit and do something different because I think people, they expect a certain kind of story from me. And it's like, personally, I'm like, I'm a little bit of everything, and I feel like I know that, but I
Yeah.
don't think that everybody knows that because I think certain people, when you write a book like that, Texas Blood, they sort of
Yeah.
expect a certain kind of book. And then when I'm doing Wolverine or Green Arrow, it's like they hire me to be that guy.
Yeah.
And so I'll deliver that but I also want to be able to do something that's fun and a little bit spooky, a little bit creepy, but also, fun, funny. And
Mhm,
that's one of the things, that's one of those things that Gigi just really caught on to was just like these characters are just like kooks
mhm,
and like they're funny and like they have this humor embedded into them that I think is really great. Um, so I'm really excited for people to read. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
it was, yeah, and it's. I mean, I was born in '86, so this is not like I was. '83 is when this is based. It's
Yeah,
not. I mean, I'm an '80s kid, so some of these things, some of these references and things like that are gonna hit with me. Them playing dominoes and things like that
yeah,
in the comic does kind of hit with me, and seeing his mom cooking and stuff like that was pretty funny scene. But there's comedy in it, but it's like almost like a wholesome horror. Like I don't know, it's weird to say. It's horror in it, it's sci-fi in it. There's this
yeah,
wholesomeness to it. There's this one kid of the two friends like it wants to take the risks and was like stop being a stop being a wimp, and the other one's kind of like more reserved, and so there's like that part personalities in it that are different, and so on. So the characters seem pretty
yeah,
fleshed out in this. But yeah, it starts out obviously with back in time, with more of the Jules Verne stuff, and then it just jumps towards 1983. So the whole thing is just, I don't know. I feel like it's a period piece that's really cool too. I think that it's nostalgia that people love right now. I think a lot of us want to live,
yeah.
back in time, but not really. I
Yeah,
want the stuff from the
yeah,
'80s,
not
but I really
really.
don't want. I want the good stuff from the '80s, but not like the bad stuff from the '80s. If that makes any sense. And so I think
Yeah,
that it strikes a bunch of chords, and I do think this is not Stranger Things. I'll tell you that right now in that sense. But like it can fit that crowd of people who are interested in that kind of
yeah.
thing,
I
which is
just
really
think
cool.
people paint things with a broad brush,
Yeah, yeah,
sometimes. So hear some things like said in the 80s and they'll be like, "Oh, it's like that." And it's like
mm,
I worried about that a little bit, but at the same time, you can't really worry about that too much because you just gotta tell your story. And yeah, I mean, I was born in 91, so I was kind of, but my brother was born in the 80s, so I
okay,
kind of was like, everything kind of got like pushed into my life from the 80s. Um, and I could have set this in the 90s, but there's a reason you'll find out in the next issue of why I ended up going with the 80s. It
yeah,
just made more sense to like go early
yeah,
80s. And I also, a lot of my nostalgia is for that stuff.
Hmm.
Star Wars, Indiana Jones, all that kind of stuff
Yeah.
was like I was growing up with all of that. So it was very important to me to set this in that time period and try to capture a little bit of my childhood, but also not just my childhood in terms of like what happened to me when I was a
Yeah.
kid, but in terms of like the things that I was absorbing, the things that I was enjoying, and just trying to have a little bit of fun with that.
It's also kind of fun if you try to if you base it in current times, they ride from one house to another on bicycles, and I don't know if people do that anymore. So I don't think there's some things where you kind of have to put yourself in that situation. Like I've always thought that like X-Files, there's no way that X-Files could be a show on today and based in 2025 because like I feel
Yeah.
like half the stuff they've just debunked by like calling each other on a cell phone. Or like I've always thought like Seinfeld, like half the episodes are them like missing each other, like in the movie theater or stuff like that. Like if you just had a cell phone, you called each other, you'd be able to figure out where each other is. You wouldn't do
Yeah.
this. And so there's certain time periods where like certain stories have to sit in certain places because of that too. And I just feel like
Yeah.
I don't think that like my son's 4, but like I don't think him playing dominoes would be a thing, or riding his bicycle with friends is not as much common as it was back in the 80s and early 90s. And so I think that's also part of it to me is like that factor that certain stories have to fit in certain places because of that. But
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, that was, again, that was like a big part of my childhood
mhm.
was just like you're bored and there's nothing to do. And it's like, what are you gonna, we could watch a movie, we could go and like, we can go out on our bikes and find some, shit to get up to.
Mhm.
And that was kind of what the whole, idea was for this comic was like, what if there was just like something happened while these
Mhm.
guys are on their like adventure?
I also love.
And
I want to spoil it at all, but I do just this one line where he goes, it says, but isn't it raining outside? He's like, no, it's not. And then it cuts to a scene of it just raining
yeah.
outside, which is phenomenal. Because I'm like, that would also be the thing where I'd be like, no, it's not. Well, I'm just gonna go anyway, or I don't care. It's raining, whatever. We're gonna go. But I just thought it was kind of funny. I'm like,
Yeah.
it's raining
I'm
outside.
glad
No,
that
it's not.
landed. I'm glad
It
that
was
landed.
great.
Yeah,
It was
that
so
was
amazing. But yeah, it has, like I said, it has that thing in it. And I will say, glancing at the PDF I have right here on my computer too, is speaking of the artwork and design of it, is the dominoes scene where he clicks the domino and the domino falls.
yeah.
That like it's just a beautiful. And I wonder, I mean, it's a 2-page spread across the top, and I'm hoping it
Hmm.
lands as much on print as it does in digital, because obviously in digital
Yeah,
there's
yeah,
just a
yeah.
seamless there. But it's just gorgeous in that sense too. So I think that it's not only a fun, wonderful, nostalgic and sci-fi horror story. But it's like I said, I mentioned off the top, it's a stunning book to look at, and I'm so glad you're finally being able to tell this story after so many years of writing it. I mean, is there a lot that's changed? I mean, not that we're going to get into details on this, but like, is there a lot that's changed since the beginning of this?
I mean, originally it was a very just simple sort of, yeah, I mean, it was very simple to
Mm.
start. I mean, I
Okay.
really didn't, I also, I sort of had to, I went through a period where I was like trying to think about how would I tell this story, now, like with no money. And like
Hmm.
that's like kind of how I would think about things is like, how do I do this? And I just sort of at a certain point you go like, well, I'm just going to go big because
Hmm.
you go big or you go home. And it's like, why not? And so like the whole thing grew from there and introduced all these characters and like the what's going to happen down below and like all this kind of stuff.
Hmm.
So they really just like really grew and expanded, and that probably happened like somewhere around like 2012, 2013, something like that was really where like and it hasn't changed like too much since then,
Okay.
but it has changed here and there. And then also because it was originally like Texas Blood, it was originally like a film idea that I was going to
Oh,
do.
okay. Yeah.
And then you know, readapting it into or adapting it into a comic book, things change there too. So there's certain things that I couldn't fit that I wanted to fit because you only have, well, I don't remember how many pages it was per issue, but I think it was like
Mm.
maybe 22 and then 20 for the rest of them or something like that. So it's like you have a finite amount of space and you only
Hmm.
have 5 issues to tell it in. So how do I do that? So you
Hmm.
have to like pick and choose like how you want to get to a certain place. And sometimes you realize, oh, I don't need this whole scene. And then so there's certain things that changed, but I mean overall it's like since 2012, 2013, it's been about the same
Hmm.
story in terms of, the overall structure of it. Which is really fun too, that it's like that, something I wrote back then is like now happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
It's
you
cool
kind of
because
hope
I think
those
there's a
things
lot of people out
happen.
there who have these stories from their high school time or age or even younger, and they're like, yeah, I don't want people to read this. So it's kind of funny that like
Yeah.
yours is actually one you're like, no, I tweaked it a little bit, but like this is something I created in high school that I really want people to read.
Oh yeah, no. I love the stuff I came
Yeah.
up with. I mean, I'm really fortunate that I don't regret this. I'm so happy that I'm finally able to tell these
Yeah.
stories because these are things that I was kicking around for a long time. The thing I'm doing with Jake was a comic that I was drawing in high school myself. Just like tinkering with it and drawing
Yeah.
characters and drawing p bits and pieces of it, and I drew a couple full pages, but never ended up coming to fruition. And I adapted that from a comic into a screenplay while in college, and then now I'm adapting it back into its own thing, and it's like it's changed since then. So it's like it's very different, and yeah, I don't know. It's fun to get to it's because I don't think these ideas really leave you,
Yeah.
they're with you, and I feel like telling them now, like you exercise
Mhm.
that demon, and it's like out of you. Um, and so it's a little surreal that this is
Yeah.
actually happening because I've been sitting with it for so long. But I'm really excited for it to be out there.
It's when your teacher was telling you to stop writing right now about this stupid thing. It's never going to be anything. And you're like, haha, now look at this. No. But
Well,
yeah,
yeah,
there's,
I actually, so the thing I'm doing with Jake, which I obviously can't talk much about
yeah.
because it hasn't been announced, but I actually got in a fight with my professor about it because he kept trying to change it. So it's like like sort of a noirish thing, and like he kept pushing it further and further into noir,
Yeah.
and like I was trying to straddle this balance of like sci-fi horror
Yeah.
noir,
And
and he just kept pushing it further and further, and I was like, I literally had to like go to the department chair and be like, "Hey, he's like changing it so much that it's not my story anymore."
yeah.
And like had to like have a talk with him, like like this isn't my st I like what you're coming up with is like it's cool, but like that's not my thing anymore.
Hmm.
And it like really like it's like stuck around for a long time, and so it's really fun to have like a whole life before
Yeah.
with these things where they have sometimes I'll focus on it and sometimes it'll sit on the back burner, but it's like it's always there. And to finally now be coming out with them and finally gonna see what people think about them. It's really fun.
That's awesome. And if the story is well worth it, it might as well just because it was written years ago doesn't mean that you need to write something new. I think that these stories, I will say right now, I've read issue one of Far Down Below, and it was well worth the wait, in my opinion. I obviously didn't know it existed in 2008, 2009, right around then, but I'm glad you made it and glad you did it. I will say that I'm not going to show this to my grandmother because she is a huge Raggedy Ann fan, and I'll just leave it at that and not, I don't want people to piss people off or anything like that. But there's a moment where I'm like, holy crap, this would give my grandmother nightmares. But what's cool is also that I recognize the character, which is also one of those cool things. There probably are going to be some younger generations who will read this book and be like, I don't know, that's just a doll. Like, no,
Yeah,
it's
but
that's actually historic.
that might be true, but I also think that for hopefully there's kids like who I was,
Yeah.
growing up, where they'll see something like that and they'll be like, "What is that?" And then
Hmm.
want to like know more about it,
Hmm.
and so they'll like start to do their own research and figure out things. I mean, that was how I found like certain comics and movies and stuff like
Yeah.
that. Was that I would read something or watch something and be like, "Oh, I love that," and then I
Hmm.
would read about the people that made the thing and then find out what inspired them, and then I'd go out and find that stuff. And so it's like, or if there's a movie mentioned or a comic mentioned or whatever, or certain, whatever pop culture reference, like I'd go out and like figure out what that is. So if people do that, I mean that there'd be no greater compliment to
Yeah.
me than
Oh,
that.
yeah, I mean, I hope
So,
so. I mean, it's one of those things too. When you write a book that's based at a certain time period, you have that balance or that fine line to put things in there to let people know, hey, this is 1983, but also not too
yeah.
much where you're like, okay, I get it. It's 1983. I understand that. Like there's this balance you have. I mean, you have, something on the TV, you have the dominoes, you have like the kitchen, the phone. There's things that make it so that like, okay, I know where we are. And Raggedy Ann is one of those things that potentially puts you in
Yeah.
a spot, but doesn't overdo it. Like I said, it's not to this point where you're like, okay, I get it. I mean, did you see Y2K, the movie?
No, I haven't
Okay,
seen
there's,
Y2K.
and I mentioned this before in the podcast, but it's like it's so much. I think it's necessary for that movie. Like it's part of their whole like shtick is the fact that they're like over. sparingly doing it to say
Yeah.
it's Y2K. But it was just kind of funny after a while, like, okay, I get it. This is the year 2000. I understand. I figured it out by now. Okay, you need to stop doing this. And like I said, there's that balance. And I think that this book has just enough of that, at least in the debut issue, premiere issue here,
Yeah.
to say, okay, now I know where we are. I know what time it is. But it's not to the point where you're smacking me in the face, being like everything is a
Yeah.
reference to the 80s.
Well, and I think that like you said, I think that it's
Yeah.
important to kind of set up,
Hmm.
just so that you can stop talking about it.
Yeah.
Once you say it and you like kind of drive it home, like this is where we are, this
Yeah.
is the time period, like blah 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 blah. Then, and going forward in the next couple issues, it is very much down below, and
Yeah. So
so it's
you,
like
yeah.
it's all just adventure from there.
Hmm.
Um, And yeah, so if you have all that out of the way, you're good. You don't need to
Yeah.
worry about it anymore because it's there. You said it. But yeah, you don't want to, drive it home and keep telling people every issue. It's 1983.
Because like unless you're talking about the specific date, it's not like every day you're like 2025. Like it's just
Yeah.
like part of your life. So yeah, it's pretty cool with that. I mean, you started the issue off with, like I said, we're back in 1865 and kind of giving you a foundation of what's going to happen in the future, what we're going to find out, kind of thing. And you end the issue with a little bit of a cliffhanger and to the point where like I'm ready for the next issue, but to the point where we got to know these characters that we're basing this book on, and I think is the biggest thing. One of the most difficult things I think about debut premiere issues of a series is like, okay, we can't go too fast because people need to know who these people are going, who these characters we're going to follow are. But we also can't go too slow because like we only have 5 issues to tell this story. And I think that you
Yeah.
did balance it pretty well on this one. I think we got a little bit of everything, and I did feel like at the very end. I was like, God damn it, I have to wait too long for this next issue to come. Which I think is great because I mean I think it gives us it's suspense and it's part of monthly comics is the fact
Yeah.
that you're excited for the next issue. If I wasn't excited for the next issue, no one would buy
We
issue
would have a
two,
problem. Yeah.
and I think that would be a problem. Yeah, so I think it's just enough, and I think it's I'm really excited for people to experience it, and I think that
Yeah.
again I tend to read the comic that the creator I'm talking to, I tend to read it the day or two before, so it's fresh in my mind. But I'm kind of wish I was reading this a month ago because I want to read it over and over and over again because I do like it that much. I will say it's crazy. I don't just not just because you're on here. I think it's a fantastic debut, premiere issue of a series, and I'm
Thank
excited
you.
for more. I'm really excited for more people to read into this for sure.
Thank you. I mean, it's, you got to think about these things when you're doing a premiere issue. I mean,
Mm.
whether it's Ultimate Wolverine or your
Yeah.
own book, like far down below, it's like you need to think about like what is going to sell this to people because
Mm.
you need to catch people.
Mm.
Same thing with Green Arrow. It's like you need to get people.
Mm.
You need to show people that you know what time it is and you know what you're doing and trust me, come along for the ride, you know.
I, I'm excited to see what's below the surface there in Eastern Pennsylvania in 1983. I'm really, I know it's not a true story because I haven't heard about it. So this is not like, this is back in time. No, I'm so glad to see, excited to see what happens. It's going to be fun adventure to go on with
Yeah.
you. March 26th is when it actually comes out. But FOC is right around the corner too. So people should check that out too. But I think that it's going to be fun. I think it's exciting. I think it's going to meet a lot of people, a lot of genre blending to the point where it's going to meet a lot of different people in a good spot. I think that sometimes people are like, "Oh, horror," and they're like, "Eh," or like, "Oh, it's a little bit of everything." And I think that's
Yeah.
where I think that is going to do well for it because it does fit everything. And the cover of cover A is absolutely phenomenal
Just wait,
from
they get
Jacob.
better.
Yeah, and I'm sure they do.
It's like, I know that you like the first one, but
Yeah.
it's like they just like keep getting better. And the logo design was also
Yes.
done by Gigi, and that's like she did an amazing job on that. So,
Yes.
but
And
yeah,
cover
no.
your cover B, you also you get horror icon really there doing your cover B
Oh
there.
yeah.
Yeah, Francisco Francavilla. Like that's just beautiful as well.
Yeah. No, he's amazing.
Yeah.
I've known him for a number of years.
Yeah.
We've
Okay.
and have been like floating around each other and just kind of, now that I'm doing comics, it's like it's really cool to have him do a cover.
Yeah, it's
So,
it's 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 gorgeous in that sense too. So I'm excited for that to hit. So March 26th that comes out. Before we wrap things up here really quickly, I'm so excited for people to read far down below. But you also have something coming out in May. Is it the goddamn tragedy?
yeah.
Is it one shot? What is this all about? Just quickly touch on this really quickly.
So it's a one shot. It tells the story of this fictional sort of idea of what if you took The Shining and you mashed it with the Donner Party. And that's what the idea is. And it's with a fantastic artist named Sean Curanero, who has done some independent work, but hasn't really done anything full length, published with an American comics company. And so this is his first real, foray into doing
Mhm.
something like this. And I'm really fortunate to have him on board for this. It's dark, character driven. It's I hope creepy, and yeah, I don't know. It was just a fun idea, and I'm happy. I always like doing a one shot.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited that this is coming out. But yeah, it's just like you mentioned something, and I'm like, oh, what's coming out? And I'm like, oh yeah, that one's coming
I
out.
feel like it was
There's
just
too many things now.
it was just announced not long ago either. I mean, I don't feel like it was
Yeah,
been that
yeah.
long. I
They
think it's
announced it maybe like last month or something,
yeah,
but they
yeah,
just announced like the covers and all that. And
yeah.
we got
That's
a
what it
bunch
was.
of great
Yeah,
covers. We got I don't even we got Jenna Cha for
yeah.
Who's in the Sickness. We got Jake did a cover for this too. Which like I
Uh,
said, I like to bring Jake on, in
Tula
some way,
Latoy,
everything that I do.
Latte, Tula
But the
Latoy.
artwork within is really cool. Sean has this sort of it's hard to describe, but it's sort of like this like pseudo manga meets Mignola style, and then he also d does this watercolor on it, and his stuff is awesome, and I'm really excited for him to hopefully kickstart a career in American comics because he really should be doing a lot more.
Yeah,
Uh,
I would say yeah, there's interior art in the email I got from Oni Press that it has that watercolor look to it too, which is really like I don't know if
yeah,
does he is it watercolored?
I mean, he does fine art
Okay.
work, but I believe this is digital, but it's done in the style, the watercolor style. Um,
I mean, it kind of, I guess, honestly, this is a little bit messier, but it kind of reminds me of what a Legacy of Violence style of Andrea Muti
hmm.
does as well. Has that similar, I don't know, I feel like I said Andrea has more, um, but I don't know. It
Yeah,
feels like it
for
has that,
sure.
like, yeah, it has that watercolor feel on that, which I liked a lot. Legacy of Violence is one of my favorite comics of recent years.
Yeah.
That came over at Mad Cave, so that's pretty cool. I'm excited for that too. Yeah, it looks pretty cool. Yeah, they do a lot of like 17 emails from Oni Press where it's like announcing something and then like covers and then the interior art. Like it's a very good marketing on that sense. They just like
Yeah.
tab it along because
Oh, they're the
FOC for
best
this
at
is
the
until
marketing
May
game,
5th.
for sure. I mean,
So
I
it's
wish
good.
that more companies had their marketing strategy
Mm,
because they are very good at what they do.
mm,
But yeah, no, it's really cool to have this, come to fruition.
mm.
This was an idea that wasn't like sticking around for a long time. This was like a newer idea too.
That's
Um,
awesome.
and yeah, it's fun. And
That's
the watercolor stuff really fits the time period too. I feel like it
okay.
works
Yeah.
for, sort of has that Godfather 2 kind of like
Mhm.
drawn out colors kind of thing.
But yeah, that's coming in May. But you have Ultimate Wolverine right now. You have Green Arrow coming out as well. I really enjoyed the Night People. If anyone wants to check that out too, that was really
Yeah,
good
that's
as
my
well.
weirdo Oni
Yeah,
Press book.
yes. But far down below
Have
to
a
me is gonna
guy
be
pissing on a car in
yes,
like issue
yes,
2.
yes. It's great. I think it was a phenomenal series. I don't know what you're talking about. Nat Texas Blood is also
No,
great
I
and
like
phenomenal
it.
as
Don't
well.
get me wrong. It's an oddball
That's
series.
oddball.
Yeah, I
But
don't know any books like it. It's like
yeah.
it's weird.
Yeah, it did stand out on its own for sure. But like I said, Far Down Below is phenomenal. I'm super excited for people to read it. March 26th at your local comic shop. Let your comic shop know that you want it, so they can get it in there. And I know the distribution world is a little crazy right now, so just it's not too early to let them know. Just let them know you want it and just figure it. We'll
Yeah,
get it to you. That's the
for
big thing
sure.
right now. But yeah, I'm really excited for that, and I really appreciate you taking time to come out on the podcast and chat about Far Down Below and so much more. We'll get you back on in the future when something else cool comes up, if that makes any sense to you.
For sure. Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Chris.